Virgin wanted to kill Command and Conquer until the day it shipped.
Really?
Yeah, they wanted to kill it until the day it shipped. They thought it was just a complete boondoggle and a complete waste of money.
What?
And then all of a sudden they were like, oh shit, you guys pay our salaries. Originally, Red Alert was supposed to be an expansion. It was just supposed to be an expansion, and we were given a year to do the expansion pack. About 2 months into it, I said, I think I have the design and I have the idea, and I think I have enough understanding of where our asset pipeline is that we can do a whole game in that time. We're not meant to work as hard as we did back then. But at Westwood, if you didn't own a sleeping bag or have a couch in your office, we knew you weren't going to last.
Really?
Like we knew you weren't going to last.
You're listening to Board with Nelly.
Ed, if you're good, we're good to go.
I'm ready.
How do I say your last name? Is it the Spanish way, the 2 L's? Is that with the Y sound?
Yeah.
Yes.
So the easiest way to know it is in Spanish, when you see an I, it's like a hard E, like a double E. And the 2 L's is like a Y.
Yeah.
So
Ed
Castillo.
Castillo. Yeah, I've been learning Spanish for the past 2 years, so that's why I caught that early.
There you go. Del Castillo. Believe me, very few people get it right.
Yeah, I didn't want to be those guys that got it wrong. Just another one. So, for people that don't know, you've worked on countless games. You have a really long resume that I think if we sat down to talk about every game you've worked on, we'd be here for years. But some memorable games, or some games that stand out to me as a kid, Command and Conquer Red Alert, Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. You've got the Lord of the Rings on here. I mean, what do you remember most? What's your, I guess, fondest game?
Well, I think, for different reasons, there's a couple of different, like Command and Conquer and Red Alert were absolutely, formative for me. I did, prior to working at Westwood, I was working at a little company called Minecraft. And Minecraft, we were doing real-time strategy when we were still calling it real-time strategic simulations. And it was a chance to take everything I'd learned in that little tiny startup environment and kind of scale it, right? So I'm always going to remember that. I'm always going to remember, sleeping on my couch in the office and all the crazy, there were so many crazy stories that come out of that. That's a whole interview in and of itself, just the Command and Conquer days, and all the friends I made there and all the crazy stuff we had to do to get that game to be as good as it really was in the end. But, I got to be honest, the one that's near and dearest to my heart is always going to be Battle Realms.
Battle Realms, yeah.
Right? So Battle Realms was the first game that Liquid Entertainment did as a company. Liquid was the company that I formed with my partner, Mike Grayford. And I poured my heart and soul into that thing, right? And it's, it says a lot that 20 years later, almost on the anniversary, we're coming up on the 20th anniversary of the game. It's still on Steam. It's in Good Old Games. And I get a check every month because people still play it.
Yeah,
right?
That's crazy.
And that's amazing, right? That, as a matter of fact, the support crew that's underneath that game started as volunteers, started as fans of the product. They were doing the work before we could, and now the proceeds from that game go to supporting more development of that game.
Right. What's interesting to me is I've had a few other developers, and all of them have a very similar kind of story where it's like they made this game. I had a developer that made Heroes Might Magic. I don't know if you've played that. Age of Empires. And all of their games continue to thrive today because people from the community have modded them, and there's so much love and care in these games that really, they stand the test of time.
Yeah, and a lot of those games that you're mentioning, they were first in class, right? They were the ones that made the biggest impact because they weren't dupes, right? They weren't just somebody copying somebody else's game. So I think that says a lot for. We would get very philosophical, but I'm a big fan of innovating rather than just mining existing things, and I think there's a lot of value, not just in the revenue side of it, but in the memory creation side of things. If I put a list of what fans say to me when they talk to me, it's this game blew my mind, right? This game changed the way I saw gaming, right? And things like this. So anyway.
There's real value there, not just with games, but with anything that you're doing in life, whether it be content or games or movies or music, just to put everything into it. And the real testament will be the time itself. Will people still play it? Will people still listen to it? Will they watch it? What's really interesting to me is like your background, I believe, unless Wikipedia is incorrect, it says economics and a minor in visual arts and psychology.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. I graduated with a degree in economics and a minor in psychology and another minor in visual arts. I really liked both of those topics and didn't want to give them up. So, which it's funny because, if you talked to me then, I never would have known I was going to be making video games, and all of those have really come into play a lot.
Really?
The psychology comes into game design. The visual arts has let me art direct stuff. And that's how I grew up. I grew up in this business. I got into the first job that I had in this business was at a folding table doing customer support. And that was customer support back when customer support was the only way you could order a game. Right?
Right.
That was pre-internet days. So we were taking credit card orders, putting boxes in boxes and shipping them.
Wow.
Right? We were putting product in boxes and shipping them. And and I said to my boss, look, I know a little bit about games and I played Dungeons and Dragons and I play all these board games. And, what if you're understaffed? What if I clock out? Because I was an hourly worker at the time. What if I clock out and, after my 8 hours, I'll clock out and I'll work for free for you. And I'll work on these games. If you teach me, if you guys show me how to do this stuff, I'll do it. And I designed my first game, Siege, from my customer support desk.
That's crazy.
And after that, they said, well, we don't understand why we're paying you to answer phones. So right. I got promoted to design, and then I kind of same kind of battlefield promotion stuff. I noticed that there wasn't anybody maintaining a schedule and or a list of deliverables for the products we were working on. So I created the notion of a spreadsheet and the notion of a timeline and the notion of having estimates on our assets that we are delivering, and all that. And so I kind of self-taught myself, or I kind of self-taught the production role to myself. And then I was ready, to go to Westwood.
Did you learn coding while you were switching in from that position, or how did that work? I'm really curious, how does one make that jump? Because today that seems almost impossible, right?
Yeah. So irony was that I entered into college with a computer engineering major, and I was accepted under that as my major. And I got to college and I hated coding.
Right.
And I hated it for a couple of reasons. The main reason was they weren't teaching me the coding that I was seeing in the games. Right. They were teaching me all these old languages that no one was using anymore because the teachers hadn't, done any real coding since that time. Right. So I really had just a bad experience there, and ended up with the economics and the psych and the VA degree. But so I never learned coding. And if you're asking me, how did I become, I'm not sure what the question was. How did I become a designer? How did I become a producer?
But I guess both. How did you transition from a seemingly, like what a sales position I would call it, to being more hands-on and becoming like creative director and all that, and creative.
Yeah. So like I said before, and so I'll go more granularly through the process. Yeah. So what happened was, so I was there, and I'm answering phones, but when you're answering phones and helping people through the product and et cetera, it's like being a fireman, right? You're only working when the phone rings. And so there was a lot of downtime. And I was like, hey, the first thing I said to the boss was, I said, hey, I got a lot of downtime. Right now, I'm just reading your wife's Vogue magazines. Mm-hmm. What if I wrote the game manuals for some of the games you're working on? And it's like, if you don't like it, just throw it away. But you're paying me for that time either way, right? So wouldn't you rather have me doing something that could potentially, work for the game instead of just wasting time? So what boss is going to say no to that?
Sure, of course.
So I wrote like 2 game manuals from my customer support desk during, and often I stayed after hours. I would clock out at my 8 and I would stay after to keep working on it. And after I was done with that, I went to him again and I said, look, I don't have any more manuals to write. If you teach me how to build levels in this game, I'll do that for you under the same deal, right? And I get that the timeline is more compressed, so I'll guarantee you that I'll be here 10 hours a day at least, and I'll only charge you for 8. Wow. So it was basically giving him a bunch of free work.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So what boss isn't going to,
sure.
What boss isn't going to take that? And so that's what I did. I that's how I ended up designing Siege from my customer support desk. Was every time there was downtime, I started building levels. I started creating the story for those levels. I started creating the basically I designed all the missions for the product. And then at the end of that, he was smart enough to say, I don't know why I'm paying you to answer phones.
Right.
I want you to do that. I want you to do that full time. And that's what I started doing.
I think it's such an incredible story. That's kind of why I needed almost like a second slowed version of it, because it seems so unattainable almost today. Well, I mean, yeah, certain amounts of, effort and showing up and being there probably can get you pretty far, but I don't know if I could get you a transition into a position probably would be, 4-year degree, computer science, or maybe not computer science, but, some sort of background in design, surely, right?
Right. Well, I think everything's a little more evolved now. And I think the challenge that you're always going to have, and I tell this to people a couple of times a year, it's number one, don't be afraid of giving your work away for free.
Right.
Right. Because that is the safest way for someone to see your value. Right. And the moment you put a price tag on your work, there is a calibration that happens against that money. Am I getting my value? Right. If the price is 0, you're always getting value. So the chance of having a good impression is better when your price is 0. And obviously people need to eat. So I'm not saying work for free for your whole life,
sure.
But don't be afraid of giving some of your value away for free. Right. And then I also say, a lot of people gravitate towards big organizations. And there is this false notion that a big organization like EA or Ubisoft or whatever, or Microsoft is going to be more secure and is going to offer you more benefit. And that's not always true. Right. I have seen massive layoffs at those companies,
right, that
are less thought out than firing a single person at a 13-man company.
Of course.
Right. So, I mean, Minecraft, when I went there, was about like 12 people. It was like 13 people. So if you had value, it was very easy to see. Right. And if you didn't, it was also very easy to see. Right. Whereas when you're at in an organization, a larger scale organization, what you're going to end up having is that there's going to be such a hierarchy of value of perceived value creation that what I see a lot is that the hardest working people get the least credit for it, right? In those larger organizations, because the least hardworking people need to claim that as theirs.
Yeah, the bureaucracy
so
gets out of hand. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, then you have managers who are taking credit for the work that their employees did, and then you have the manager's manager who's taking credit for the manager. Right. And so the value chain gets spread so thin that the chance of this guy getting his comeuppance is much lower than if he's in a flatter / smaller organization.
That's not only true for it's a good topic to have. It's definitely not true for it's also true for like engineering, which is I have electrical engineering background, and it's spot on. You want to go in your early years at least to a place where you're a very valuable member of the team. One, because you're not as easily disposable. Two, is because you're absorbing so much information. Whereas like when you go to a big, let's say engineering company, you're not learning anything. You're collecting probably a comfier check, sure, but once that well runs dry, you're gonna be you don't know where the next one is. So you have no like real experience or high level problem solving or whatever the skill set is.
That's right.
You didn't develop that in your youth.
And you're more likely to be let go for reasons that are completely out of your control.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, we need to make, a classic large game company thing. We need to make our number for the quarter. So the easiest way to do that is to cut heads.
You're a pawn. You're essentially the lowest piece in chess. You're right. So,
I mean, I remember, and I won't mention the company, but I remember when a company I worked for, like, basically deleted an entire floor of that building. And it was me who said, I bet there are some good people in there. Can I interview them?
Right, of course.
And that concept hadn't even occurred to a single human being prior to my arrival there.
Really?
Right? It was just like these batch dismissals, and as a result of that, actually, that's why you have that's why you have such an amazing, thriving, vibrant gaming community in Austin today, is because of that company's random ejection of talented people.
Right. They all form their own little things, and they got the best of the best together. They're all pals.
Yeah.
It's a small industry. Everyone talks.
Yeah.
So when you need designers, you know who you go to, right? And you're like, I work with this
That's
guy.
right.
He's fantastic, right? I mean,
That's right.
this could be its own podcast, but there's so much I want to ask you. Looking at your earlier work, it seems like there's a lot of, fantasy, fictional worlds, dragons,
Sure.
wizards, ancient gods. Were you always a big fan of that? And did you luckily get drawn into these games, or were you seeking out these games?
So always been a big fan of it. Yes. Lucked into it. Yes.
Right.
So that there was no control on my part in terms of genre. There was just opportunity that presented itself and me grabbing that opportunity. Right. So, I grew up on Saturday morning. This confesses my age here because people don't even know what I'm talking about. But I grew up on Saturday morning television. I grew up in LA, which means that at the time that I was a child in LA, you would wake up to Tom Hatton's Popeye cartoon hour. Then you would go right into, you would go to Saturday morning cartoons, then to Popeye's cartoon hour. Then you'd go right into the Family Film Festival, also moderated by Tom Hatton, which was always Errol Flynn, Robin Hood,
Wow.
Swashbuckler, Bob Hope Bing Crosby, Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
So lots of Sinbad, Golden Voyage of Sinbad. So lots of fantasy, lots of swashbuckling. And then, I had working parents. So, and they needed to rest on their weekend too. So you'd go into Channel 9, they had martial arts, they had Kung Fu theater. And then you'd go to Channel 13 for black belt theater. And these were all just those hyper kinetic and awful Kung Fu movies that, you hear tell about, but you've never seen. And then you'd go back to Channel 9 for WWF at the time, now WWE. So yeah, my world was filled with fantasy and martial arts, and I loved that. My video rentals were every fantasy movie that existed in the video store. Just to date myself further, back before Blockbuster.
To be fair, I was there with you, so I know. I still remember Blockbuster.
That's right. So I discovered Dungeons and Dragons around when I was 12. Played it adamantly. I was the DM most of the time. So I ended up being not just a player of fantasy, but a creator of it. And, and for my whole block, I had like 8 players and I was the DM. And it was large age range between my brother, who's 5 years younger than me and me, or 4 years younger than me. Sorry. And, the kids of my age and a couple of years older. So I think that got me, like, the game mechanics of D&D was a very slow roll into the faster paced game mechanics of a video game. But I also got to be part of the, Atari 2600 in television, ColecoVision era, right? So I got to see, like, I remember my first encounter with a video game was, I think I had to be maybe 10 because it was still when I was living back in Glendale. My uncle, who worked for a computer company, when they were still punch cards as entry, you programmed a program on a punch card, and they were still using magnetic tape, and said they didn't have hard drives. They were still using magnetic tape for storage. And he sat me in front of this machine that was all just, blue, luminous green, and showed me a game that was like bowling. And bowling was like, there was a zero that went back and forth across the bottom of the screen. There were like L's, capital L's lowercase L's that were marking the lane. Amazing. And there were X's for the bowling pins, right? All ASCII.
Yeah.
and you hit the space bar to launch the ball, and that was the game, right? And he had to, and I still remember this, he had to drag me scratching, clawing, and screaming, crying, like rage crying away from that computer.
Right.
Because that's how much it changed my life. Like it's an indelible moment in my, and there was another game there with a rocket, and there was kind of a lane changing avoidance game, but they were all kind of the same ASCII nonsense, right? It was just like his X's and O's and bars, and A's for the spaceship, capital A for the spaceship. And so I don't even know why I got lost in that story.
It's all good.
I just
the background.
I've been there since the very beginning, right? It's like, if I was sitting up somewhere and someone said, what life would you like to have? Right. And you got to pick it. And this whole thing was a simulation. It was just a ride. Like, I think when I was there, I said, well, I want to be there through the golden arc of the opening of video games.
Of course.
Right.
Did you play a game called The Prisoner by any chance? By David Mullen?
Wait.
In 1980?
Was that like a text game?
Yeah.
Yes. Okay, it's coming back to me.
So I'm just curious because I had a developer that made that game, and I was like, I think this is around the time that you probably got to this. And this game, even when I saw it today, when I saw some of the footage, I'm like, this would have blown my little brains like wide open.
Right.
I understand the volume of how good this was at the time, right? You have to take everything with context. So yeah, you start working on these games. You're starting to get a little bit of experience. I'm truthfully not the most familiar with some of these, but I am most familiar with the Command and Conquer franchise, specifically the Red Alert games. So how did you start working? How did you become working? How did you start working on those games?
So got really lucky. So there was a time in my life where I think like I had figured out that Minecraft was struggling, and that I had reached kind of the apex of where I was going there. And at the time, we still did CESs. Now they're E3s, but there was the video game portion of CES was the only place video games were showcased. Right before it broke out and became E3 all on its own. And we went and showed. And when I was there, I said to there was one of my coworkers. I said, "Look, Minecraft is done. I've done all I can at Minecraft. I need to go walk the show and try to find another opportunity." And the show was almost closing. It was like Sunday. It was like 2 hours before the closing of the show. So I ran down to the other side of the hall where the video games were, because for whatever reason, EA had decided to put us in this upper part. And I just started grabbing cards because I was out of time. I wasn't going to interview on the floor. I wasn't going to be able to meet anybody. And when I was grabbing cards, this woman grabs my arm, and I'm like, "Oh fuck, what did I do wrong?" And sorry, I didn't mean to.
No, you can swear. You can swear. You're good.
All right. And it turns out she was an early form of headhunter, an early form of agent. And she's like, she interviewed me with a tape recorder right on the spot. What do you do? Who are you? What are you looking for? And she placed me at Westwood. She said, you're looking for a producer. I have a guy who does that. And I interviewed at Westwood. And, even I even had like the classic movie moment interview where the phone interview is like, we're still on landlines and I'm living at home.
Right.
And so I pick up the phone and I answer to do the phone interview, and my mom picks up the other phone, and it's like, "Eddie, who is that?" And I'm like, "Mom, I'm on a phone interview."
Oh my God.
It was just like classic, like out of a movie moment. And so they liked me enough to have me fly out. I flew out, I interviewed there. And then they offered me a job, and I picked up my bags and I moved to LV, it's like, and I lived there for, 4 years. And it was a hard thing to be that far away from my family and everybody, but I did it. Like I had this at the time, I had this survival knife, and it became like the totem. Like, I think sometimes you need totems to get through things,
sure.
Right? I had always lived within 2 hours of my family, my entire life. And here I was like 4 hours away. And to me, that was like epic distance. Right. And I just said, I'm going to the desert. And if I have to run around naked and catch rattlesnake for food, I'm going to do that. Right. And this knife became like the symbol of that. No one's going to beat me. No one's going to tell me where I can and can't survive. Right. And that worked. That was, I don't even know where that knife is now. That's how absorbed into my psyche.
The knife is you now. It's a part of you.
In some way.
Right. It doesn't disappear. It's just taking a different form.
Yeah, it went away in a way that I have no clue where that knife went. Like it just suddenly was one day not in my world anymore, not in my reality. So living there was at first hard because I didn't have any friends, but then I made friends, and it made it easy to work really, really hard because I was single, and so I busted my ass there because I could immediately tell that the people there were super talented, and I was like, oh shit, I'm the idiot in the room. I need to not be the idiot in the room. And so,
but that's a great position to be in. To be the dumbest in the room is a fantastic position to be in because you can learn so much, right?
Yeah, until everybody points at you and goes, "You're the dumbest in the room," right? You got to make sure that never happens.
Just don't bring it up.
Right. So I just, I've always made up for my lack of knowledge with hard work, and so I worked all the time, right? And those products were incredibly memorable because. I got to travel a lot. I got to go to the other Virgin offices because Virgin was the company, the publisher at the time. I got to go to the other Virgin offices. I got to learn about inter-office politics because Virgin wanted to kill Command and Conquer until the day it shipped.
Really?
Yeah. They wanted to kill it until the day it shipped. They thought it was just a complete boondoggle and a complete waste of money.
What?
And then all of a sudden they were like, oh shit, you guys pay our salaries. I guess we need to listen to you now.
I can't believe that they would look at. Did they actually look at like the game itself and the development? Did they have any understanding?
But you didn't have anybody there who knew good from bad. Yeah, you didn't have anybody over there at the time. So, they were too caught up in the politics of who controls what, and not caught up enough in what's a good game, right? And so we did that. And during the whole time that I was doing Command and Conquer, I was taking really, really clean notes about how long everything was taking. And, because at that point, no one in the company understood the concept of analytics. And I was applying, metric like analytics to the team. Like I would record what a team member said it would take and what it actually took and what it would take and what it actually took. And I did that for every single task, start to finish on that whole project. And at the end of it, I took a couple of days to analyze the data and came up with like a coefficient for every single employee. I said, look, this guy usually comes 20% under, this guy usually goes 20% over, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And knowing how well I knew them, because I would also visit every single guy on the team and gal on the team every single day. So, I knew what motivated them. I knew what they were excited about. And originally, Red Alert was supposed to be an expansion. It was just supposed to be an expansion, and we were given a year to do the expansion pack. And I said, about 2 months into it, I said, I think I have the design and I have the idea, and I think I have enough understanding of where our asset pipeline is that we can do a whole game in that time.
Wow.
And of course, like the free work, what boss is going to say no to that?
Yeah, who's going to say I'll take the expansion as opposed to the full game in the same time and same budget?
Exactly right. And I had already built, in my spare time, I'd already built the framework of that idea, which was, what if every conspiracy theory project that you ever heard of coming out of World War II era technology was true, right? And what if Einstein actually does invent a time machine? What if all of Tesla's stuff is actually real? All of those theories are actually true. And what if Einstein invents a time machine, travels back in time, and since Einstein's Jewish, motivation there to kill, and he kills Hitler before Hitler's rise to power, right? And that leads to, well, gee, in a power vacuum, somebody else steps in, and Russia becomes the new big threat.
There's so much there. Yeah, there's so much opportunity for creative freedom. It's really incredible that it wasn't done before almost. And
so I kind of had the skeleton of all that already, and I said, I think we can do this in a year. So we went off to the races, and we tried. We did it. We pulled it off. And to my embarrassment, I will say, I think that the flaws that Red Alert had were flaws, unfortunately, that Westwood knew about and decided to ship with anyway. And that was for me the end of the road for me. Like, and what I mean by that is, when I signed up to Westwood, they were like Blizzard. It's done when it's done. We do good product. We ship the finished game, not the half done game. Right. And what happened between the original Command and Conquer and Red Alert is that the power shifted, right? Westwood was the purchased by Virgin underdog that had to prove themselves up till Command and Conquer. The moment Command and Conquer shipped and did so well, the president of Westwood, basically started running Virgin.
Right.
Right. But when that happened, all of that, we do good product, we ship it when it's done, kind of just went away. And all of a sudden it became about quarterly revenue and, all of this stuff. And when I saw a product that I knew wasn't finished be forced to market outside of my control, I said, yeah, that's it for me. Right. That this place has taught me all it can.
Yeah. The writing's
right.
on the
Just
wall.
like it was the same feeling that I felt, especially because of all the politics around that. Right. Because I really fought hard to delay the product. Right. I really fought hard to, we knew about the tank rushes. We knew about like that I can't remember all of them. The tank rush is the most, the biggest one, and it was just ship it anyway. Right. And it was like, wow, this place has really changed. Right. And it's not the place I remember. And so that's when I moved on and I did a tour of duty kind of studying under the masters that I had played for. So I, spent time working with Richard Garriott. I spent time working with Sid Meier. And, when each in its turn, when I thought I'd learned all I can from them, I decided to move on. And after Richard, I just said, I think if it's now or never. I'm 30, I'm either going to start a game company now or I'm never going to do it. Yeah. And, because if I fail, the world isn't over for me. And so that's when I started Liquid.
First of all, that's incredible. Like that, I think that's a powerful thing to take to any job. When you think you've learned or you've capped out your knowledge, or you think now it's going to be detrimental to be there, is to move on and seek new knowledge, seek higher education, higher experience. But there's so much stuff I wanted to ask you about Command and Conquer, because you said you worked crazy hours and all these things. I assume you probably worked in a time where crunch was maybe a yearly thing, as opposed to now where crunch is like a month or a couple weeks before, a couple months. I'd imagine you were working sometimes those hours for like,
Hold on just a second. Yeah. Hold on just a second. All right, I'm back.
No worries. So you did you have a lot of like 60-hour weeks and stuff like that, and really
Yeah. I mean, let me do the kids these days story, right? So right. Kids these days they don't have a clue what crunch is, right? It's a joke to call what is called crunch these days crunch. Which, by the way, I'm okay with. I'm totally okay with that, because we're not meant to work as hard as we did back then. But at Westwood, if you didn't own a sleeping bag or have a couch in your office, we knew you weren't going to last.
Really?
Like we knew you weren't going to last. Yeah. Wow. I mean, I was in the office. I would say my holiday days were 8 hours a day.
Wow.
Right. I would say it was very common to be doing 10 to 12 hour days. And towards the end, you're sleeping in the office, right? You're sleeping in the office and you're going home to shower and that's it.
Wow. That's
right.
Incredible.
And you're showering like every 3 days when people say we can't tolerate your smell anymore.
Right.
Right. It was a lot, right? It was, you just had to, like, number one, I was the project leader. So I wasn't going to be the only one that went home when other people were working, right? So I'm working whenever anybody's working. And sometimes that work was just sitting with the person, right? Because I, honest to God, didn't have anything to do. But, we also, it was just a very, very tough working environment. It was, at the time, Westwood controlled email. No one had email. So you didn't even have email to your desk, so you couldn't be distracted by that. And Westwood had a lock on Las Vegas. I remember one time that one of Westwood's products got a bad review in some magazine, and my boss just went out and bought every copy that was available in Vegas, so that no one could see it.
No way.
Right? Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there was a very, very, like, because we were the only gaming company in Vegas, there was a lot around information control, and keeping people out of the know, so that they didn't know that there were competitive companies in better places. And things like this.
That knife analogy really makes sense now. It's a really ruthless. Yeah, that makes a lot more sense now.
So, and, it was a very fun time. I don't want you to get it wrong.
No,
but it was a fun time because we were all of the same mindset.
Yeah.
Right. I was not the only one working these hours. And in fact, I still think I didn't do as well as some other people did. There were people who would lose weight during this time. I mean, there were people that would really like be in an unhealthy state. I mean, I part of my mission became making sure that people ate and slept some, and and I became like almost a sideline nutritionist for some of these folks. So yeah, it wasn't easy.
But now it makes sense when you say, the company was not willing to extend deadlines to, push a better product. It really makes sense why that mattered so much more, because you feel like you're doing everything you can, literally, physically.
For sure.
You're doing everything you can.
For sure.
And you're saying, hey, we need a few more months. Like, I've been working 60 hours a week for the past year. At least you can do is, entertain that thought a bit.
Yeah, I mean, towards the end of Red Alert, I mean, we're sleeping 3 to 5 hours a night for 6 nights. We're working all 7 days. And on the 7th night, we're giving ourselves 10 hours of sleep, 8 to 10 hours of sleep. So, and no one's doing anything but showing up to work or going home to shower.
Crazy. Yeah.
Right. So it wasn't like we're all like slacking and, yeah, we'll get to it when we get to it. And, it was like everybody was working really hard, and there's always, I should say on average, right? There were always people who were ahead of the curve and said, I'm not putting in an hour over it, right? There were always some people like that. They tended not to work out, but there were always some people like that. And I didn't have the luxury in those days to fire people and get new people. I had to work with what I had. So that person, stayed to the end of the project.
Fair. I mean, I think we could talk about crunches and work environments in the 80s and 90s all day, but it is the time.
It's horrible.
It is the time. That's what happened. We're trying to do better, obviously, now. But I wanted to ask you, now it kind of makes more sense. I was going to ask you what makes those games so special and stand out, because this was a time, a little bit after Command and Conquer, when you had so much competition. There were so many quality RTS games, StarCraft, sure. Age of Empires.
Sure.
How did you differentiate yourself, and what would you really focus on to make yourself stand out against the competition?
It's a good question. So I don't think there's any one spike you can point to. It's kind of like Amazon, right? Amazon competes on every level.
Right.
And I think that's what we were doing. We were competing on every level. I mean,
like Phelps competing for every gold medal at the swimming.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
We wanted to have the best interface, the slickest, fastest interface because we knew that people were going to want to play this game fast. We wanted to have the best unit balance, and we had, this kind of like tiered helix of units where, like, here's a soldier, and the soldier's really good at taking out rocket troops. But rocket troops are really bad at taking out soldiers because the rockets miss a bunch. But they're really good at taking out jeeps, right? But the jeeps are really, bad at hitting the rocket guys. But the jeeps are really good, and we just kept pushing the chain along so that everything had an answer, and that answer was further down the tech tree.
Right.
Right. Until you got to the end. And then you use micromanagement. So, for example, like you bring a tank into my base, if I have 5 soldiers and the time to do it, I can micromanage those soldiers to slowly take out your tank. Right. And so there was a complete circuited balance. There was a complete circuit to the balance. There wasn't this race to the high-end tech. Right. A great example is the one you mentioned. So StarCraft, when it launched, sucked. I mean, play the original StarCraft and you'll see how much it sucks. Brood Wars fixed it, right? You play StarCraft with Brood Wars, and I would say it's one of the best real-time strategy games on the planet.
Right.
Right? But play it without Brood Wars, and you'll see how it's just a race to the end human. Right? There's no compelling strategy in that game at all.
Just
but you play with Brood Wars. Yeah, but you play with Brood Wars, and all of a sudden you can do this Reaver drop, and all of a sudden you got all these different the siege tank, you got all these mechanics that you can use in in counter to what you're being presented with, right? Someone Zerg rushes you. You have defenses against that and a counter to it. Someone, all over the place. Someone, siege tanks you. You have counters to that and defenses for that, et cetera, et cetera. So
did your D&D background help you with the balance of the game and an understanding of, or did you already have an understanding of how to balance games before that?
Well, yeah, I think the D&D certainly helps, but D&D is game balance. I say video games is like gene splicing with fruit flies, and board games and role playing games is like gene splicing with elephants.
Okay,
like it's way slower, right? So maybe it's a great introduction into balancing, right? But you have to scale up your speed for an economy, because you have to understand, and this is where the economics background comes in.
Yes,
you have to understand the concept of an economy, right?
Yes,
because real-time strategy isn't just about unit balance, it's about resource balance.
Yes.
Right? So the speed, and this is what a lot of people don't talk about, the speed at which you can accumulate your currency has to match the speed at which you can spend your currency, which has to match the speed at which you destroy the things you spent on.
Mm-hmm.
So, for example, if I can gather Tiberium faster than I can spend it, I get an overstock of Tiberium.
Right.
Right. If I can spend Tiberium faster than I can gather it, I'm always thirsty for Tiberium. Right. And when I build units off that Tiberium, if they die faster, if my pushes die faster than I can build new pushes,
right,
then I get 1 or 2 pushes per battle and it's over. Right. Great example of that is Warcraft 3.
Yeah.
Right. The original, not this new piece of junk that they just put out.
Right.
The original Warcraft 3, you get 1 or 2 pushes and then the game's decided, especially once those heroes are leveled. Right.
This is the holy grail of macro versus micro, right? Is that what we're talking about, essentially? It's the holy grail of trying to figure out how to balance those two things. That's
right. And you have to understand how those cycles work on an intimate level. Like, we were playing that game every night. That was part of our work day, or work night, I should say. Like, we would get, like, the rest of the company would shut down and there'd be at least 2, 3, 4 games of Command and Conquer.
Right.
In its undone state, right?
That's a common theme amongst the developers in the 80s and 90s, that they used to play their own games religiously, and that was already a good sign of a fantastic product.
Yep, you have to eat your own dog food is that bad saying, right? Yeah, no, like I say it to everywhere I work. I say, if we're not playing our own game willingly, we're missing something.
Of course, yeah, that makes sense.
Right? And we shouldn't be launching this.
Yeah.
Right, because if we're not playing it, it's not there. There was something I wanted to say along those lines.
Balanced. Was it a balanced thing? I can't remember.
The economics of it all. Yeah, there was something in there that I wanted to mention, but the subtlety is.
No, the example was really good that you used as well. The way I think of it, I think of Age of Empires as well. In the early stages, when you're choosing between macro up, build more villagers, more town centers, or you're building an army trying to go for the final kill, there has to be a trade-off there. That, yeah, maybe people don't think about, but like, if I spend money on army and kill some of your economy, you should not be able to remass your economy as quickly, or whatever the trade-off is, it has to be there.
And so a lot of those things, I mean, to make a horrible segue to plug my own thing, it reminds me of this whenever Warcraft 3 comes up. It reminds me of this because Warcraft 3, and this is confirmed by the current CEO, the previous CEO, and the numerous executives at Blizzard. Warcraft 3 was held because of the launch of Battle Realms.
Really?
Because Battle Realms, which was my first game, was trying to address a lot of these issues. And one of the things we introduced was the concept of heroes on the battlefield. We introduced we called them Zen Masters in our game. But we had this concept of heroes that were more powerful than the grunt units. And when we launched the game, they bought all the copies in Irvine and they played it and they said, yeah, this is a better game. We need to delay and improve our game.
Wow.
And that's when heroes got introduced to Warcraft 3. That's when a lot of changes happened to Warcraft 3 that made it the success it is today. And, or was until they released the remaster.
I think I did my due diligence, but I did not know about that. That's quite something.
So it was a huge feather in my cap when I found it out years later.
Oh, yeah, of course.
When I ran into people, when I talked to people from Blizzard, and they were like, "Yeah, Battle Realms was the game that really kind of put us on notice and said, holy crap, we got to up our."
Oh, you cut out again. Maybe 10 seconds back. Yeah.
Okay, and I think it's a testament to Battle Realms that it's still on Steam, it's still on Good Old Games, it's still selling. And it's 20 years old, and it's 20-year-old graphics.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean,
I haven't altered the art. Like I haven't updated the art for 20 years, and people still enjoy playing it. And there's an avid fan base that is still pinging me for changes and for updates, and we're doing it. And that's actually what we're using the money from the sale for.
Yeah, I do want to talk to you a bit later about Battle Realms, because I did have some questions about that. I think when you brought up the Warcraft 3 taking basically your idea, I actually talked to another Age of Empires developer, and they said, I'm curious if you guys had this at your companies. They said every so and so months they would get together and someone would have a presentation on the other games that were in that genre. So they would play StarCraft, they would play Red Alert, and they would say, "Oh wow, this is a great concept. How can we do this? This is we don't like this part, we don't want to take that." And is there a fine line between taking someone's ideas for your own selfish good, or is it free for everyone to make every RTS the best it can possibly be? That's a really tough one, right?
Yeah, well, so there's lots of ways to answer that one. I mean, the simplest way to answer that is legally there is really no way to protect the game mechanic.
Right.
So America doesn't have recognition of that as a trademarkable or copyrightable thing, right, or patentable thing. So from a legal standpoint, it's absolutely legal. From a creator standpoint, I'm torn about it, because would I love to be super rich because I invented something that got used in a sure, but I don't know. I have a couple of stories along that line, and let me see if I can get through both of them. I'm going to say Warcraft 2 and Warcraft 2 and piracy in Battle Realms, and those are the two things. So I remember showing at an E3, at an early E3, or I think it might have been a CES still at the time. I remember showing Command and Conquer, the original, with its new interface, the bounding box interface, right? Which I don't know if you can remember, but we were the first people to do that. We were the first people to allow you to kind of drag a square around a group of units. Prior to that, you had to individually click on each one.
I didn't know that. Interesting.
And this was all taken from why aren't we using the best interfaces outside the game industry? Because these bounding boxes were things you could do in paint apps. And we showed it off at that show, and I went over to Warcraft 2, and at the time they were showing off the same old interface of individually clicking on a unit to select it, right? And we had other optimizations as well. There were it was a whole suite of what we'll call kind of Windows 98 style interface, and left and right click and things like this. And the Warcraft guys, the Blizzard guys, spent hours in our booth filming our demos.
Wow.
Yeah, absolutely. And all of our interface was present in Warcraft 2. They did it. And to that end, I will say, and then I'll do a story that proves it, but I'll say, I would rather have the idea proliferate for the benefit of the player than get caught up in the legal control of that.
I get it.
Which isn't even possible to do because the law doesn't protect you. So I've always been that way. And as a matter of fact, when we launched Battle Realms, the Battle Realms had this kind of crappy copy protection that we were forced to use by our publisher. And there were more people having problems with it than being helped by it. And so one of the first patches we did to Battle Realms was removing the copy protection. And that led to it being pirated the world over.
Sure.
Right. I mean, Battle Realms. I've had people from Joyon and Nexon and Tencent tell me that there are millions of copies of Battle Realms, pirated copies of Battle Realms, all through Asia.
Sure.
Where it was very, very popular. And you know what? I'm not bummed about that. I mean, yeah, I didn't become a billionaire over it, but I love that so many people, like, there's a heart joy that comes whenever that fan mail comes in.
Yeah.
Right. There's a piece to that. And I made that decision. I made the decision to remove the piracy. Right. To allow the piracy, I should say, to remove the copy protection. Right. And I didn't have to do that. I could have said, well, suck it up, Buttercup.
Right.
This is what we need to do to protect our product. Right. And I didn't do that.
It's such a tough decision, or such a tough thing to look at from, there's so many perspectives, because I remember the same conversation with Heroes Might and Magic. It's a game that was not available a lot in the Balkans, a lot in the Eastern European area, and a lot of people pirated because of that reason. And yeah, is it right to pirate? Of course not, right? You should pay someone for their work. To this day, though, that's the community that's kept the game alive, that they still do tournaments, they've modded the game, so it's like, it's this fine balance of, like, these people are actually the biggest fans you have, and if there was an opportunity, maybe they would have bought it, maybe they wouldn't have, but the point is, they're the ones that are avidly keeping the game alive 20, 30 years later.
That's right.
So that's
absolutely right. Yeah, and I would have never, there was a time when I might have answered that question a little different.
Sure.
But I always felt a good idea belongs in the hands of the many as opposed to the few. Right. Which is why I get so pissed off about this whole, like, I don't know if you many years ago, people lobbied to extend how long it takes for something to become public domain, and they turned they moved it from 50. Yeah. So right around the time, not saying anything bad about this company, but right around the time when Mickey Mouse was about to become public domain, he was in his 49th birthday.
Right.
Suddenly, a lot of money flooded into Congress via lobbyists to extend the public domain law from 50 years after release to 75 years after release.
Wow.
And and what that's done is it's created this vacuum. Like, for the first time ever since that law was created, there isn't new stuff coming into the public domain on a regular basis.
Sure.
Like, there'll be a 25-year gap of public domain stuff, because everything that was in at 50 is in,
stifled creativity.
But everything that was 51 now gets to 75, right? And so I'm a fan of that. Eventually it should be out there more than.
We stand on the shoulders of giants, right? We're supposed to be helping each other along this road in some way.
I mean, there has to be checks and balances. I think some countries have too loose of a non-protection. Like, some countries have no problem immediately cloning the successful stuff, and I'm not a fan of that either. But I think there has to be
a compromise, right? And then something in the middle. Yeah.
Yes. Anyway, I know we've gotten completely off topic.
No, it's good. No, this is why you're gonna have to come back for another session.
Yeah, I can't wait to talk to you about NFTs and crypto and where the game industry is headed.
Okay,
that's like maybe another whole.
That's another. Yeah, we'll do that again. But I mean, there was. What do I want to ask? Yeah, Command and Conquer, to me, what really stands out, which I'm surprised you didn't mention, but maybe you just didn't think about it, was the amount of effort that went into cutscenes and the videos. And I don't remember a game in that time period that. How big was the budget? What was it like making almost full-scale movies for a video game? You are gonna love this story. Yeah. This is you have gone right to my bread and butter. So when I got to Command and Conquer, because there was already a partial development in place when I was hired. They were doing teletype briefings. Oh my God! Kind of yeah.
Right, and that's what everybody wanted: teletype briefings. I had made a friend in the company who was from a little company called New Tech, and New Tech had done a piece of software called Lightwave. And Lightwave was a product that was used primarily to put graphics on top of video, right? Like channel markers, channel 4, CBS News, Newsflash, the overlay graphics that you see on a television, the early days, right? He was there because the president of the company really someday wanted to make films and didn't know, was moving towards that. And so I said, you're gonna love this because I get to claim full credit for this. I said, these briefings are lame.
Yeah.
And I'm looking. Oh, wait, hold on. My second headset died, so
no worries.
I need to switch to just external audio. Hopefully, the noise in the yard isn't too much.
I still don't hear any noise. I think we're okay.
That's awesome. So I said these briefings are lame, and I'm seeing the kind of stuff you can do with Lightwave, and I think we should be doing that. So one Saturday afternoon, Felix, which was my friend's name, had the keys to the studio, and under pain of being terminated, no one was allowed to go in there. And we went in there anyway. And we filmed me, and I don't know if that footage exists anywhere. I don't think it does anymore, now that Westwood's kind of gone. We filmed me doing a briefing, and I remember it well. We called it the Pirate Ed video, and it was like I was giving a briefing about going in on a mission, and I opened my hand like this, and the idea, and I wrote the script for the whole thing, and I put a globe, and the globe was going to be in my hand, so fingers up front, but the globe's in my hand, and I was going to point at the globe and flick, and the globe was going to stop, highlight Angola, and then Angola went and became big. And then I keep talking about the forces that are going into Angola and how we have to stop them. And the graphics, it's little triangular and square graphics are playing on top of the Angola territory. And we filmed that whole thing on a Saturday. And then we started working on it that night. We went to lunch, or we went to dinner, and then we started working on it. And we started overlaying all these graphics. We put tanks, and we put we basically said, here's the metaphor. The metaphor is, and now they've actually done this, which was fun to see. It's still a prototype, but I said, what if there was a pane of glass between myself and the person taking the briefing, right? And that pane of glass was basically what they, like a two-way iPad. I didn't have the word iPad, but it was a two-way computer.
Sure.
On a glass display, and I could touch it like I'm touching, a chalkboard, and it would be creating this stuff, right? And I said, and what if the people on the other side, they're generals that we're enlisting from home because generals are being assassinated left and right, and so this software that we're creating for them, we're creating a piece of software that they can install on their Windows machine, and they can control soldiers from a distance, right? And so we created this entire fiction, which is why you see why the install for Command & Conquer was so awesome.
Yeah.
Because it was part of that fiction. It was part that you were installing. It even won Install of the Year in a couple of magazines, which was the first time they ever gave that,
right.
That thing. But that's another story. We can talk about installs later. So we filmed the whole thing. We spent all of Saturday night, all of Sunday, doing and rendering the graphics and the video. Sunday night, we pack up our offices because we're fired. That's how we feel. As soon as our boss knows that we were in the studio, we're fired. And so we literally pack up our offices so that we can get our personal possessions, because we thought we were going to be handed our asses and thrown out the door. And so we walk into the boss and we go, we went into the studio. We know that's a fireable offense. We know we're fired. We've already packed our bags. We're ready to leave. But before we go, we want you to see what we did. And we brought him up to the studio. We brought him up to the post editing suite, and we said we could not let this game go with teletype. we want all the briefings to be video. And we also brought this guy who was a director that they had hired to run some other stuff on another project. Joe Kukin, Kane.
Mm-hmm. Kane, yes.
And we showed it to them, and he says, "You're right. You should be fired, but now I need somebody to do this."
Right.
And so
you're fired, but you're rehired to do that.
right. And so we, and that's how the briefings became videos.
That's incredible. Yeah.
I wrote the script. Well, I didn't. Sorry, a guy wrote the script, and then we rewrote almost all the scripts. Joe Kukin and I rewrote the entire Command and Conquer script after it was written, after the first draft.
And then it just kept going, right? You just kept like, oh, we're gonna get better actors, we're gonna get better visuals, we're gonna, you know. Did you have? What was the problem with the disk space? Wasn't that also another problem that you couldn't store video on small floppies?
Sure, that's why some of that stuff looks so res now, right? So low res because we had to compress it. We had to, you know, and we had to trick it by like, okay, we're running out of space, so we need to put that video in a small window,
yeah,
you know, or something like that. So, yeah, we're really. It was a moment of doing the right thing despite your own self-interest.
Sure.
Right. Which is why that part of the reason why that product's so great. Right. I mean, like the install, I hated the fact that at the time every install sucked. Right. There was like, I'm like, from the moment I put this disc into the computer, it should be awesome.
Yeah.
Like that should be an awesome experience. And so we scripted it out that way. We said, we're not doing a standard, I forget what it was. There's a standard install software at the time. I forget what the name was that everybody was using. Right. And it was the same damn gray box with the same blue dashed blue line for progress. It was horrible. It was horrible. I said, we're not doing that. We're coding this. We're making our own install. We're actually going to create something that plays full screen animation the whole time you're installing.
That's insane. Yeah. I mean, at that time, that's an insane notion.
No one had ever seen that before. And it was so cool to see. It was so cool. You know, it was like, because we had the whole thing. We had like all of the narrative was, if you go back and you go frame by frame through that, it's like, you know, uplinking to NASA satellites, like all the speech effects, all the text effects are telling you exactly what the narrative of this game is, which is it's too dangerous to be a general on the battlefield anymore. So, and this is pre-drone. So we were just being visionary about this shit.
Right.
I will confess this though. I was an avid reader of popular science.
Okay.
Right.
Fair.
So a lot of the inspiration for this comes from that popular science level military.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
Where like you're seeing Hummers with sound cannons on the top. And it's like, okay, well, what if we did that? And, you know, and stuff like this, and VTOL aircraft that are taking over for helicopters, and you know, et cetera, et cetera. So yeah, I could dive into Command and Conquer for days. Yeah. If that's where you want to end this.
I mean, we can talk about Command and Conquer forever. I mean, your level of care and these things not only shows in the video, but in the audio as well. The music, you know, the art direction of the game.
Oh my God,
there's so much.
The audio guys were so awesome. The audio guys were like the best.
Yeah, I can't imagine, you know, what it's like to have so many people locked into the same goal and then achieve it at the end. I'm definitely gonna have you back because we didn't even talk about Lord of the Rings. I don't know how much time you still have. We didn't talk about Battle Realms. We didn't talk about Sid Meier's Alpha Centauri. I don't know how much time you have, so it's in.
Why don't we see if we can go up to when I start my own company, and maybe that's a
sure, let's do that.
That's a because there's not a whole lot to tell. I mean, Red Alert and Command and Conquer were huge. You know, at the end when I told you. Kind of one of the things that kind of happened that was lame after Command and Conquer was so successful, you know, Westwood really wanted to make films. I mean, the boss at Westwood really wanted to make movies, and that's why he named it Westwood, by the way.
Yeah, from the Hollywood, from the street in
yeah, it's LA. Named after the neighborhood in you know, off of Beverly Hills that he really liked, and so he started hiring a bunch of people from the movie business, and The problem with that is that movie people don't know games, right? And in every corporation, doesn't matter what the field is, when a person is hired at a high level to do a job that they do not fundamentally understand, they go one of two ways. They either A, put in the elbow grease to learn what they need to be learning on a 24/7 schedule until they get it.
Right.
As you can imagine, that's hard. Or they politic. And I would say that in my career, I see that 80% politic rather than do the hard work to learn
The
what
easier
they need to
route.
learn.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so politics started just blossoming all over that. A company that had almost no politics, right? People could walk into each other's office and say, that last piece of thing you did sucked.
Right.
And no one would be offended. Like, do you have any idea how rare that is in this day and age?
Yeah, it's rare. No, for sure.
That you can say, that you can walk up to somebody and literally say, not figuratively, literally say, the last thing you did sucked, and here's why. And that someone wouldn't look at you like you're an asshole, but instead would go, okay, tell me so I can make it better.
Sure.
Like,
that's rare.
I haven't seen it since then.
No, I agree. I agree. Yeah. But that was before. Was that before Red Alert 2 came out that you're talking about these Hollywood people?
Yeah. So these people started coming on during the original Red Alert.
Okay, I got
They were working on other things. They were working on Iberian Sun. They were working on they were because Westwood was doing other products.
Yeah.
Westwood was doing like the Commando game, the first person shooter off of the Command and Conquer franchise. They were doing Monopoly. They were doing Blade Runner. They were doing all sorts of stuff. And the politics just got to be too much, right? And when they kind of pushed Red Alert out the door so fast, that was kind of what broke me, right? That was kind of what made it so I started to look.
Does a part of you regret a little bit not being a part of Red Alert 2 because that was such a iconic game as well, or no? Do you have you don't look back at that like that?
I think I was good because for me it's less about being attached to a success and more about being attached to a mindset.
Gotcha.
And it always has been, right? It always has been. It's always been about feeling like what I'm doing has purpose and meaning, and feeling like that I'm in a cohort of people who feel like-minded, right? But when it became political and we stopped worrying so much about quality and started worrying more about ship schedules, and I'm not saying we weren't worried about ship schedules, but everybody was busting their ass to make the ship schedule, right? It wasn't like everybody was like, we'll ship it whenever, and I saw the other products coming down the pipe, and there were other little things happening too. Like, I was an enormous Blade Runner fan. Like I mean, that's the poster that's right there on my wall.
Right.
You can't see it, but it's Blade Runner. And I really wanted to be a part of that product. And they just kept me at arm. Like, I couldn't even be part of the meeting. Like, I couldn't be any part of it. Like, they just no, and it was, so there was a lot of this kind of stuff. And that never would have happened in what I'll call, first year Command and Conquer Westwood.
Right.
They would have said, "Oh my God, you're a Blade Runner fan. You have something to contribute. Come." Right. And so the politics of who owns what and putting up fences and borders and boundaries and all of that stuff kind of just really turned me off to. I said, long term here, I'm not a politicker. I speak my mind, and I get and I'm watching myself get burned for it.
Yeah.
So long term here, I'm dead anyway.
Did you see or in any way predict, I guess, the downfall of the studio, and especially with EA in the lurking? You didn't expect that to come.
No, there's no way for me to know.
Maybe it was a sense.
Level.
Maybe it was maybe you just kind of got some writing on the wall. Hey.
I mean, I watched it happen, and it made sense to me that it was happening, because I mean, I don't blame Westwood for that. I blame certain specific individuals who I won't name, and I blame people getting tired of, like, if Westwood had let Virgin decide their product schedule, Command and Conquer would have never shipped. It would have never been released, right? That would have never happened. And what happened when EA bought them is EA won. Right? They sent people in. They started changing the products. The products became. Look, I remember watching from afar. I was there when a team was working on something they called Buccaneer Bay, and Buccaneer Bay was an MMO. Early days MMO that was it never released, so you're never going to find it.
I was like,
never released. You're never going to find it. They were working on something they were calling Buccaneer Bay. I think it was called Buccaneer Bay or Bounty Bay, Buccaneer Bay, one of those two. It was the name of the restaurant that was in the Treasure Island Hotel when it was still pirate themed.
Okay.
Which I think was Bounty Bay or Buccaneer Bay. Anyway, it was an MMO. They were going to take the original Sid Meier's Pirates, which goes all the way back when. They were going to take the idea of the Sid Meier's Pirates game and make it multiplayer and make it persistent state multiplayer, right? So we're talking if this had released, it would have gone toe-to-toe with Ultima Online.
Right.
That's how early days MMO we're talking.
Yeah.
There was really nothing else, right? When there was really, and EA came in and they changed that to Black Cat and the Legend of Skull Cove, and that did ship. And it was called Black Cat and the Legend of Skull Cove, I think.
Yeah,
they
that's
basically,
a tough search. Yeah. I can't even find it.
Did you find it?
No, Black Cat and the Legend of... No, there's nothing popping up.
Because it was horrible. It was a total failure. It was a copycat game trying to live off the Lara Croft Tomb Raider franchise. They turned it from an MMO, if you can believe this, God view MMO to third person over the shoulder female pirate character.
Yeah. I think I know which game you're talking about now, but I can't remember the name. But yeah, I think I know. And the cover of the game was like a pirate with big boobs, I believe, if I'm not mistaken.
Right.
Okay, yeah.
Redheaded,
I do know that.
Redheaded girl.
Yeah, there's nothing that EA can do that can truthfully surprise me. So,
Okay, so it looks like I got the name wrong.
What is it called?
See if I got the right. It was called Pirates: The Legend of Black Cat, and cat is spelled with a K.
Oh my God, that's awful.
So probably Catherine.
Yeah. That looks awful.
So yeah, it was abysmal, and of course it was abysmal. It wasn't what the product was supposed to be.
Sure.
Right? It was totally different. So anyway, I just realized that I might be being a bit too negative.
No. You're okay. I actually truthfully didn't know too much. I still kind of don't have a great understanding of why the studio fell apart. I know EA bad, obviously, but I don't know kind of why it happened, because to me it seemed like the products were relatively successful and then they slowly started losing that. I don't know.
And the truth is, I don't really know either.
Right.
I mean, I don't. The honest to God truth is, I have no real idea why it was disintegrated or it disintegrated. I know that. No, I do know something. I do know why. Actually, now that I
remember it,
EA didn't want to keep a studio in Las Vegas alive. They tried to relocate everybody to Irvine.
That's the reason. That's actually the reason. That's off. That's so much worse.
Well, that's the part. Yeah. That's the part that I know, because I remember all of them being relocated to Irvine, or attempting to relocate them to Irvine. They gave them a tour of the place. They showed them the place, and what happened was, when they shut down the studio, there were 3 places you could go. You could go to EA corporate up in San Francisco. You could go to EA in Irvine, or you were out of a job. And a lot of the core people who were really the spine of that culture decided not to go. They stayed in Las Vegas, and they are petroglyph today.
These are people that have already given so much to the company and so much hours to the game, and they've already sacrificed so much years of their life making these games. It's a really crazy thing to ask them to. You should be accommodating for the best, I guess, needs of the team.
I mean, Joe Bostic, the lead programmer on all the Command & Conquerors, one of the best guys you will ever meet, sweetest man you will ever meet, salt of the earth person. He's a petroglyph. He was one of the founding members of Petroglyph. Mike Legg, again, center of the social and cultural hub of Westwood. He's the one that made everybody feel good about working those long hours. Petroglyph, right? Ted Morris, an amazing, at the time when there was barely any technology to support it, bulletin boards, communications, later on website, later on producer, the Westwood Studio, Petroglyph, right? Steve Tall came in and did the Windows 95 version of Command and Conquer because the original was released in DOS, right? Petroglyph. So they all stayed in Las Vegas and they all are Petroglyph today.
Yeah, these are all like, people that were probably really well known with each other, and they were gonna do what's best for them, and if they could do it collectively, all the better, right?
Oh, for sure. And I remember it is a testament to that time and the work and what the power of a team, that despite all of the things we've talked about, I remember those times as some of my fondest in the video game business, right? And, we've talked about the hours and all that other stuff. We've talked about all the stuff that, could go down the route of I was a slave. And it's like, I don't even begin to see it that way.
You're not alone. That's the funny part. I
really enjoyed that.
Yeah, you're not alone.
Yeah, I really had a good time. And that just shows you what camaraderie will do, right? Camaraderie will let you do the most outrageous efforts and feel like they are fun. Right? Not even good, that they're actually enjoyable, right? And that was the real magic. In my opinion, that was the real magic of Westwood Studios.
Right. And you're not, like I said, you're not alone, because the other developers I talked to that also created some of these timeless games, they all said the exact same thing. We worked like crazy hours. Sometimes I didn't see my wife, all this stuff. And then at the end of the day, when I asked them, how did you feel about that time? It was the best time of my life. Every single one of it. They built something bigger than themselves and sacrificed so much. There is a thing, and I don't know what the psychological term for it is, but when you go through incredible effort, because I won't call it hardship. Adversity? It didn't feel like hardship ever. Yeah, but it didn't feel like adversity. No. It just felt like effort. Effort, okay. Right? When you are capable of sustaining incredible effort for long periods of time, and that sustaining is coming as much from you as it is from the people around you who are also sustaining that effort. Right. Man, it is in some ways it's the pinnacle of human achievement. In some ways it's the thing that people remember most because it's so impactful in their lives. It shows them what they're capable of as a unit, right? It shows them what they're capable of as an incredible team. So that's the power of team that people don't talk about because it's unpolitically correct to talk about working hard and working long. And, everybody wants this magical moment to come. Like I remember one time somebody talked to me, I was having an honest conversation about snow and how I'll never live in a region that has snow. Right. Because I just think, I'm from Canada, I'll kill somebody. 2 months in, I'll kill somebody. I can relate. Yeah. I've been living in Canada for 20 years. And the counter position that someone presented to me that completely, I understand snow now, is they said, when you come out of it and you know that everybody in your neighborhood went through the same thing and you all came out of it together, it's this incredibly bonding feeling that no one even talks about. But it's this incredibly bonding feeling, and that's why we stay. You get humbled. Yeah, you get humbled. Maybe you get humbled by what you're living in. Yeah, I think that's what the biggest, because you're all living in that same. No one's getting an easy, day with the snow. When it snows here, it snows for everyone. So you're all getting humbled. So yeah. Wow, a lot more philosophical than I thought we were going to get. That's the beauty of open conversation. We can go anywhere. We're at an hour and 20 minutes. I've gone 20 minutes over than I told you. So. I don't know if you're in a rush. You said we would talk about up until your company. Yeah. So unfortunately, I have a meeting at 4:30. No worries. If you ever want to do it again, we'll do it again. Yeah. So this is a good place. If you feel we've put a bow on Westwood Studios, maybe we pick it up from there. Beautiful. I think that'd be awesome. I'd be really, really happy about that. Ed, are you sure people want to know all of this stuff? You know what? I don't know. We'll find out. It's a Pandora's box. I got to open it to find out, What are you working on? Like, plug whatever you're working on. I know you're working on Battle Realms are still, right? I know you made like a video a couple months ago.
Battle Realms is still out there, and I would ask people to check it out. I think it's still one of the best real-time strategy games on the market. Believe it or not.
We'll definitely talk about it, because I did have a bunch of talking points, and I'll actually even get a little bit more familiar with it next time. So I do want to talk.
And I'll save my other. I'm working on what I think is the future of gaming, and I'll save that for the next one, just to put it on a cliffhanger.
I'm excited. I'm in the crypto space, so I'm kind of at least a little bit familiar with that, so we can go a little bit in depth there. But beautiful. Yeah. You have Twitter?
Maybe
anything?
You can teach me something.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about that. Do you have a Twitter or anything you can plug that people can follow you, find you?
BattleRealms.com.
BattleRealms.com. Beautiful. I'll put all your information there.
Or our page on Steam.
Beautiful. Yeah. Beautiful. Thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.